Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Peter and Debra's The Twinnies podcast. I think this is our fifth one now. It's a fourth or fifth one. I'm not sure. It feels like we been chatting for so long. Number 6, is it? Good heavens. Crikey, that's gone fast. So what have you been up to? I notice you're not in your normal space today. Where are you?
No, I'm coming to you live from NSPCC Jersey. I flew out this morning and saying my farewells to our supporters and staff and volunteers here. Another day, another cake, and if you can have another huge NSPCC cake, which is lovely. Last night we had our my final family dinner, and Esther was unable to be with us, but Esther had written me a poem about me and my leadership, which they had framed and signed, and includes a doodle drawing of me by Esther, which has to be seen to be believed. And Rebecca read out this poem, which was emotional and highly personalized. I'm not going to share it here, but I might share it at one point. But that was quite a moment. So when it came to my concluding remarks at the end of the evening, I thought, well, I'd better give them a poem. And so instantly created a ChatGPT poem about NSPCC supporters and why they are important. My goodness, the quality of the poetry, the rhyming poetry that one can get out of these AI services is really quite something. So since then, I have been obsessively creating more and more personalized ChatGPT poems, including one with all sorts of Jersey-related detail, which I used with everyone this afternoon. I have been admitting that these things are ChatGPT generated, but the quality and the emotion of them is quite something, especially with a little bit of tweaking. So both time-saving, also slightly scary.
Well, I tell you what, Peter, all I will say is if you ever feel moved to write a poem for me, the stipulation is it has to come from you, not ChatGPT. I don't care if it doesn't rhyme, if it doesn't scan, and if all the words are wrong. That's, that's my own stipulation.
Okay, I'll write you a poem for our next episode, okay, which will capture your special qualities.
Oh my God, I'm not sure that's a good idea. Are there special qualities something can be aired publicly, Peter?
Well, we'll see. I'll be in control because I will be editing whatever it is ChatGPT may or may not generate to assist me with this particular task. And you'll never know because I'll be taking full responsibility for it. In fact, for all you know, I may be a Peter Wanless bot that is being broadcast from NSPCC Jersey, saying exactly the things that one would expect me to say rather than me being the real person. I don't know how you would be absolutely sure that this is me.
Well, all I can say is to our listeners, he's not a bot, I promise. I haven't pretended that, my mate is Peter at the NSPCC and we're together. And also, Peter, I would know. Women always know.
Well, I'm wondering actually, Debra, if you are the real Debra Allcock Tyler, because what you said on our last podcast appeared in the Daily Mail, and I don't think Debra Allcock Tyler would be quoted in the Daily Mail, would she?
No, I definitely would not willingly be quoted in the Daily Mail, Peter. So it was a bit of a shock to me to discover that actually both of us were. Although what really did make me laugh is that you were. The picture they had written down Sir Peter Wanless of the NSPCC underneath a picture, and the picture was of Bradley Wiggins.
Oh,
I was like, I don't know if you noticed that, but the impression was given that I was someone who'd gaily and happily chat away to the Daily Mail, and I really wouldn't. So I know there are millions of people out there who read it. I wish they wouldn't. Some of my family are some of them, but yeah.
I think they should have credited the podcast, shouldn't they?
Yeah, more scarily was that the Mail said that they'd been listening to our podcast, which had me think, what? To our podcast. I don't know whether to be flattered by that or terrified, to be honest.
Well, we're making the news. We were ahead of the curve in relation to the budget, weren't we? I think in the conversation that we were having, and quite a lot has happened subsequent to episode 5, including the budget itself.
So, what do you think about it, Peter? Overall, I'll share some of my general thoughts, but what do you think about this first budget of this new administration?
The entire budget,
Yes,
not just the bits which are directly related
just
to.
a bit that have pissed us all off. Yeah.
I think that it was really well. I saw someone that said progressive Labour government raised taxes to spend money. Shock horror. And I guess, that's not a surprise in and of itself, especially when everyone is saying that the public finances are fragile. I mean, you can argue over whether it's 9 billion or 22 billion or 40 billion that needs to be raised, but it was always going to be a tax raising budget, and you can't raise taxes without creating losers. So I'm unsurprised, I suppose, at the overall arithmetic of the budget, especially the first budget of a new Labour government. I think they got themselves into a pickle by promising not to raise particular taxes and not to be willing to discuss in the run up to the election itself what might be required. But none of the political parties were telling the truth about the state of the public finances. That was an open secret, really. So for me, I think now we're into the details of the extent to which they really understood the implications and the nature and the scale of the losers associated with the particular changes that were made. And Rachel Reeves delivered extremely kind of confidently her budget, I think, with real authority and leadership, and took ownership for what she kept saying were my decisions. I have made this choice. If you don't make this choice, what choice would you make instead? So she now needs to own these decisions. I wouldn't be surprised if, as the whole package is scrutinized, apparently simple things that have been proposed starts to become clearer. But she'll need to do that without eroding too much of the tax take, or we'll be in difficulty again. I suppose that would be my assessment. What do you think?
So the point is any budget from any government is always going to please some people and piss other people off, because there are always bits of the budget that benefit certain sections of business, society, human beings, etc., and other bits that don't. So it doesn't surprise me that people got activated about certain parts of it. I was encouraged by the fact that overall there is a real sense of trying to invest in those things that we desperately need. So education, public health, that sort of thing. And I think that's, I personally, I think that's needed. And that's what I was hoping that we would see in the budget. So this is with my governor of an NHS trust hat on. So that's good news for us, who are working and supporting or volunteering in the health sector. So I liked the overall thrust of it. Of course, there were areas that people didn't like. Some areas I got very confused by, because I was very confused about the farmers being so angry about the inheritance tax on swathes of land. I completely understand about, it's asset locked, so it doesn't relate to cash. But the reality is you wouldn't realise it anyway until it got passed on. And because I think you and I have spoken about this before, Peter, but I'm always very uncomfortable at this notion of handing on things down to the next generation. I've never liked that at whatever level it is, whether my parents leave us their house or whether, some massively wealthy person lives swathes of land and things. I've always been a little bit uncomfortable about that. So that comes with a little bit probably of ideology from my perspective.
Even about family businesses, because surely it's a fairly kind of fundamental feature of the British way of life that we've got some magnificent family companies, haven't we, that in the past have been handed down the generations.
Yes, but Peter, and that's great for those families who own those businesses. It's not great for equality. It's not great for social mobility. It's not great for inclusion. The thing is, some things that look fantastic when you benefit from them are not benefiting society as a whole. So, but as we always end up saying, none of things are straightforward at all. But, if you're somebody like me who's passionate about social justice and equality, things like inherited stuff, we really need to examine it and say, as long as we continue with this mindset that says, I have a right to inherit my parents' stuff rather than whatever else you do with it. I mean, I don't know what the answer is. It just, and I need to think more about it, but that just makes me a little bit uncomfortable. But what I was really impressed with was the way in which she split up essentially what we in our sector would call a capital budget from a working budget. I thought that was very, very clever. And there are loads of people saying that's just shenanigans, but actually it makes enormous sense to me that you can see this is where we're going to spend, but we're also going to track the return on that expenditure in this budget. And this is our day-to-day budget. So I thought that was a really helpful move. And then in terms of the NI allowance, again, we spoke about this last week, didn't we? We said this will be a massive problem for the sector. And I think NCV have calculated it's about 1.4 billion. Although I'm unsure, because she's also increased the employer's allowance, which will offset some of that for some organisations, particularly the smaller ones, I think, although I haven't really got my head on that part of it. But that is a massive shock to the sector, and that is really difficult. But the reality is there was going to be a shock somewhere, and it just happens to be us. I can't see them making a U-turn. I mean, the sector's come together and has written and protested, and I know that some of our key sector leaders, such as Sarah at NCVO and Jane and so forth, have been summoned to the minister to discuss the sector's reaction. So the sector is definitely fighting back on it, but I doubt they'll U-turn on that. But there may well be other things that they could do in order to offset it. I was really disappointed that there wasn't anything in there at all about irrecoverable VAT, which is a massive drain on our sector, Peter, as you know. So I think there were some things they could have done there. So all in all, overall, I thought it was probably pretty good for the country, but not really great for certain sectors of the country, farms, charities with the NI bill and so on.
Yeah, the thing that I don't like about the rise in employer national insurance contributions is the apparent ignorance of the impact it will have on our sector and the ease with which they have acknowledged that there will be an impact on public services delivering these things. So it illustrates a kind of skewed prejudice to the in-house kind of public sector, as opposed to the ways in which our colleagues will now be saddled with a much larger bill to deliver not just the sorts of services that the government itself would contemplate delivering, but the sorts of services where we are filling in gaps and holes and making a difference to those who really are most in need. So I've still got a big problem with that. I think I do disagree with you on the farmers. Yeah, I'm not so uncomfortable about inherited businesses passing down the generation, especially if their purpose is to deliver something of great value to the economy. I haven't got so much sympathy with rich people who are buying up swathes of land in order to avoid inheritance tax, and I haven't got so much sympathy with massive agri businesses that are making quite a lot of money out of their farms, although they're making nothing like the profits I think that the supermarkets are making, who are squeezing the prices that they're having to sell their food at. So all of that is interesting, and I'm sure that one will run and run.
Well, we'll see what happens, and I'm sure we'll come back to this battle again in the future, Peter, about who's entitled to what in life.
Another thing that I did wonder about, you said as a kind of NHS trust person, you were pleased with the increases for the NHS budgets, but it's money. We talked about this a little bit last week. It's more money for the usual ways of dealing with unhealthy people. But Wes Streeting has said we want to see a decisive shift from hospitals to community. So I'm unclear the extent to which there's an inconsistency there between giving money to the health budget and achieving a decisive shift to prevention. But again, I think that'll be an interesting argument to be having through the big consultation that he's launched about the future health of the nation.
Will all come in one lump. They're not going to suddenly write, NHS 20 billion check, here you go, hand it over. It's going to come with conditions for sure. and all sorts of caveats around it. But it's an interesting thing. I mean, we have spoken before about the consultation in the NHS, but and bear in mind, I'm only a governor, so I've got no clinical experience or anything like that. I just listen and try to understand what's going on in my particular trust and community. But my experience is, like at our trust, people are trying really hard to innovate, to think ahead, to look at clever ways of doing things. They're spending a lot of their time trying to work their way around systems that aren't really fit for purpose. I mean, I remember having a conversation with someone a while ago about the fact that the NHS IT systems, they don't all talk to each other. And the amount it would cost to try and get them to talk to each other is absolutely huge. And so it sort of, kind of puts you off fixing it. But I was saying, actually, maybe if we just said, look, this is the way it is for this particular generation, but we are going to create a system so that from, April next year, every single child who is born will go into this new system, which is integrated, which is connected, which does have, and actually which connects to social care and to mental health facilities. And so anything at all to do with that human being is in one system. And then even if those of us of an older generation who are born before 2025 don't benefit, from 2025 onwards, there will be a new integrated system for everybody. And I don't understand why they don't do that. So I get frustrated sometimes about that. It's like we've got to fix it for everybody now, rather than thinking, okay, it's too expensive to fix it for us right now, but actually we could invest that money in fixing it for future generations. And so I would like to see things like that happening over any parliaments, never mind this government or another one. So there was a little bit of a lack of future thinking, I think. However, that may emerge. You never know. Somebody might be listening in that we don't realise, Peter. For all we know, Wes himself may be listening to super famous, global podcast of ours and making notes. Talking of global, we cannot not have this podcast without talking about the American election and waking up this morning to the news that Donald Trump has won another term in the White House. Any thoughts, Peter?
Well, I'm a bit out of touch on all of this. So yes, when I woke up, I heard that was likely to happen. And then I had to sit on the M25 for a while and then get a flight out to Jersey. And I've been in meetings ever since. So I've not seen any of the reaction or even the kind of confirmation that he's won. But I can imagine what the reaction will be like. I did see a poll that said that in Britain, I think it was 57% of people are horrified at the idea of him being the president, and a good chunk more think it'll be really bad news. So it's a difficult one to get your head round sitting in the UK as to why such incredibly large numbers of people would vote for a candidate who is so apparently dangerous.
Well, this is what's interesting, Peter. So I saw a poll today on social media, which I can't remember the source of it now. I have to, we can double check that and perhaps put it in the notes. And it was showing like how American citizens had voted by race, and 74% of white men, 69% of white women, and 55% of all other races voted for Donald Trump. Whereas 81% of black men and 90% of black women voted for Kamala Harris. So whether we like it or not, a lot of this is absolutely defined. I mean, the figures speak for themselves. There's a racial divide, not just about the fact that, Donald Trump's a white man and Kamala is a black woman, that's how people voted. And that, I have to say, it shocked me slightly. I genuinely didn't think that there would be so many white people, and particularly so many white women, because, speaking from my perspective, I perceive Donald Trump to be very, very dangerous to women. I mean, he only said in one of his rallies last week, we will help women whether they like it or not, which scares the living bejesus. Well, and of course, why would it scare me? I'm in Britain. But the reality is that of all of the country in the world can legitimately say, back out of our business, don't interfere with us because it's our boss, it's our country, whatever. But America doesn't have the right to say that, because they are so massively influential on the world stage that they're such a big part of what happens in other countries that, that's why we care about it. That's why we're obsessed about it, all the media channels around the world. So it just slapped me back in the face a bit, that how far we've still got to go with people not being hampered and hidebound or prejudiced about the colour of people's skin and things like that. I mean, you can't deny those statistics. It just doesn't make any sense. And they had been, the commentating had been that, black men were veering toward Donald Trump, but the statistics I've seen don't back that up. The vast
Yeah.
majority of them were voting for Kamala Harris. So, and of course it's, I've got a couple of members of staff who are American by heritage. I think both of them still have the right to vote in America, and they're absolutely devastated by it, And the women in particular are really afraid. What's going to happen? Is that, yeah. So I think
Yeah.
it's personally disastrous, and I think it's a massive worry. And on the media, it's all been about the fact that David Lammy, who's our foreign secretary, said some really unpleasant and unkind things about
Right.
Donald Trump. And I'm like, well, he said it in opposition, and they're true. Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yes.
Donald Trump has said way worse things about people. Sure, they will find a way to navigate their way through it, but I find myself really worried about it. I must be honest, but particularly for the women, I really worry about the women in America.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% in terms of the scary nature of this result and the what it could mean for all sorts of people in America and beyond America. I still sort of trying to rationalize why people vote the way they do. I guess you have one vote, don't you? And there'll be a hierarchy of considerations. And lots of people say um, it's the economy, stupid. And if people feel worse off than they did uh, at the start of the last administration, then that makes it difficult for an incumbent government. And we've seen lots of incumbent governments kicked out around the world. The Make America Great Again, take back control, America first, this sort of sense of we'll look after our own before we think of looking after anyone else. That is not necessarily a male, female, black, white issue, but it's a well. I suppose I'm questioning: do people think money first, security second,
Yeah,
race,
I do.
gender third?
So most stuff is unconscious, Peter, isn't it? It's like, very few of us will say, like, I'm voting and I prefer white guys. Nobody says that out loud, and they often wouldn't even know that they were necessarily thinking that. But we're assuming that all voters go into that polling booth fully informed, having thought it through, having heard all the arguments, etc. But that's not true in any country. So the vast majority of people tend to vote the way they've always voted. Every once in a while, there's a shock and a turnaround. We've seen that here in Britain, in the Boris Johnson elections, which was what,
Yeah,
2010, was it? No, not 2010. That was Cameron, 2019 or whenever it was. We saw that massive, push from the red to the blue in our country, where people voted untypically, and then back again this time. But most of the time, people vote for the people they've always voted for. Or there's one story that comes out in the media that catches their attention, and that's the only thing they think about. So, and I'm not saying that people are stupid or ignorant, because I don't think that it's that they are. It's just for people like you and I, it's our jobs to know about this stuff. It's my job to know what's going on politically, to understand what the issues are, to get to know what's going to impact part of what I have to deal with and talk about, and train people, etc. Whereas the vast majority of the public in Britain and America and any country, that isn't the case. So they're just picking up anything they know about the economy or politics, which brings me back to the media. I think the media have a massive amount of responsibility in all of this, because I don't care what anybody says, people don't drive the media interest. The media absolutely directs what people are interested in, and particularly social media, where the algorithms just feed you. So if you've already got a feeling in your head that you're not happy about the economy, even though the American economy is doing really well, actually, relatively, if you're constantly being told no, it's not, and you
yeah,
don't necessarily feel particularly better off, you're going to believe that all the shit that's piled at you. So while I'd like to think that people go in thinking about, well, what's my priority? Is it immigration? Is it economy? Whatever. I generally don't think people do,
no,
and understandably so. And that's why I think there's even more responsibility on people who are public commentators or in the media to be fair and impartial, and to, not peddle untruths. Ta-da.
yeah, it's difficult to disagree with you. I mean, for the sake of a bit of an argument, but maybe I'm just proving why so many people in the UK think that Donald Trump will be terrible. He's hardly had an easy ride in our press. There have been lots and lots of people and commentators that have drawn attention to the incoherence of his speeches, the offensive things which he has said. I mean, it would be difficult to feel confident and comfortable about what he might do once he's got in. And I don't know. I mean, I know a bit about what the media will likely be like in the US, but it's a lot of influence to hang on them to imagine that you can shift, millions of people. Or maybe you're saying you don't have to shift millions of people. It's these people in the marginal states, and if you target it well enough and you spend enough on it, then
you just have to, looking at these statistics, you just have to shift the perceptions of these white people who, looking at this, appear to be afraid of a black woman running a country. It's really difficult not to draw that conclusion. And whilst I'm sure somebody will come back and argue it's more sophisticated by that, it's so clear the colour divide. But anyway, it's one of those things where, because there's been a bit of despair in our gaff, Peter,
yes,
about it, in my circles about it. But the thing we always have to remember is that the world survived the last time he was the president. I think he's taken back control of the Senate, and he's likely to take back control of the House of Representatives, which means there isn't going to be a huge amount of opposition to him. But also to recognise that within his own party, not all Republicans are Trump supporters. So, there might be some resistance, some of his mad, dangerous ideas there. But actually, it's that I've quoted today Martin Luther King, the arc of the moral. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And I think there's something true about that. I think this is just yet another pothole, another dip in the road, another thing that's getting in the way of us moving towards real proper equality and understanding and social justice and things like that. So whilst I'm very nervous, I'm also always, Peter, always.
Yeah, me too, though. Right now, it feels like a massive pothole.
It does, that you can't see the other side of.
No.
You're filling a massive pothole with
cake.
Peter.
Another day, another cake. Yes. A fantastic NSPCC iced farewell cake. Delicious.
And more to come, Peter, more to come.
Yes, well, and probably subject to a sugar tax within a sugar tax supplement within 12 to 24 months when these numbers don't add up, and the government needs to find some extra money from somewhere. They may have to go back to sugar.
Well, somebody will blame the National Trust for it, won't they? And say it's the National Trust's fault that there's now no sugar in cakes. You remember the whole scone gate last year, or was it the year before with scones?
Yes, a woke tax.
Yes,
not quite sure how that would work.
No idea. Right, I think we've got to dash off to other things, and we've covered quite a bit today.
Yeah.
Enjoy the rest of your sojourn in Jersey, Peter.
Thanks very much. We've got a conference tomorrow about online safety. Got some great people coming along to speak, and we're hearing from young people themselves about what they're experiencing online. So that should be fun. And then I'm back in London on Friday for a budget management and planning meeting. There is no end to my dedication to my final days at the NSPCC.
Well, enjoy.
Yeah, great. Thanks a lot. See you.